That morning, I woke up to the soft thunk of a car door closing. At first, I thought it might have been the neighbor heading off for an early shift. Or maybe a delivery truck. But the sound was too close. Too personal. Through the half-open blinds of our bedroom, I caught a glimpse of movement, a familiar figure creeping up the driveway. It was Bethany. Shoes dangling from one hand, her other clutching her phone as if it might save her from being seen. She moved carefully, heel-toe, like she was afraid the concrete would rat her out. For a second, I wondered if she was trying to be considerate, not waking me up. But no. This wasn't thoughtfulness. This was secrecy. The clock on my nightstand reads 6:12 a.m. The night before, she told me she was going out for a fitness club get-together. One of those new hobbies she'd picked up in the last few months. At first, I thought it was a good thing. Something positive. A way to shake off the stress from work, make new friends, stay active. That's what she said anyway. She'd come home with stories about group runs, protein smoothies, funny little gym memes she'd seen online. Normal stuff. Harmless stuff. But something had shifted. Lately, those stories were fewer. The nights out grew longer. The gym bags heavier with things that didn't quite fit the narrative of a workout. The other day, I noticed a dress in the laundry she hadn't worn around me. A little black number, not gym wear, not even close. When I asked about it, she waved it off. Said she wore it over leggings to look cute after class. And maybe I wanted to believe that. God knows I did. But that morning, seeing her tiptoe like a burglar into her own home was the first crack in the glass. I watched her reach the front door. She fumbled with the keys, dropped them once. The sharp clink echoed through the quiet street. She cursed under her breath. It wasn't like her to be this clumsy. Bethany was always composed. Polished. The kind of woman who could parallel park in heels and make it look easy. But right then she looked disheveled. Her hair, usually tied back or styled, hung loose and tangled as if someone's hands had been through it. On her neck, just beneath her jawline, was a faint, dark smudge. A mark that no amount of blending could disguise. It wasn't lipstick. It wasn't a stray mascara streak. And it sure as hell wasn't from Kelsey's emotional hug, as she'd later claim. It was a mark of an asterisk Macy. One she hadn't gotten from me. When she finally slipped inside, she froze. Our eyes met across the dim hallway. For a split second, her expression was pure shock. Like a kid caught sneaking in past curfew. Then came the performance. The breathy, oh hey, as if this was normal. As if I wasn't standing there, seeing her exactly as she was. Late night, she said, her voice light, but her smile brittle. Kelsey got emotional, you know how it is. One of those long talks. Mascara everywhere. I didn't say a word. Not because I believed her, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go. How easily she could spin this into something I was supposed to accept. She breezed past me straight to the bathroom. A few seconds later, the shower started, hot water hissing like it could wash away more than just sweat and grime. I stood there, listening to the familiar sounds. The clink of her watch hitting the counter. The soft thud of her gym bag landing on the tile. And beneath it all, my own heartbeat, loud in my ears. Funny thing about betrayal. You always imagine it'll come with a dramatic reveal. A text message. A phone call. A friend pulling you aside with a guilty look. But in reality, it sneaks in quietly. Through little things. A closed-off smile. A perfume you don't recognize. A car door shutting at 6:12 a.m. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the indentation where her head should have been. The pillow was cold. Untouched. Like a metaphor too obvious to ignore. It wasn't just the physical absence. It was the emotional one that hit harder. Bethany and I used to be inseparable. Late-night talks that stretched into dawn. Inside jokes that made no sense to anyone but us. We were a team. Partners in every sense of the word. But somewhere along the line, that shifted. Subtly. Gradually. The space between us grew inch by inch, filled with small absences. Missed dinners. Conversations that ended in shrugs. Nights out that didn't include me. And I, like an idiot, chalked it up to stress. Work deadlines. Personal growth. The ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. I never considered the possibility that growth meant growing away from me. In the bathroom, the water kept running. I imagined her standing there, scrubbing off the night. Washing away the evidence. Practicing her lines for when she'd come back out and pretend everything was fine. And me? I was sitting there, complicit in my own humiliation. Because deep down I knew. I knew this wasn't a one-time thing. You don't sneak home barefoot at dawn because you lost track of time. You don't come back wearing someone else's cologne because of a friendly embrace. These weren't coincidences. They were choices. The question was, what was I going to do about it? For now, nothing. For now, I'd sit there letting her think she was still in control of the narrative. Not out of weakness, Not out of fear, but because I needed to be sure. I needed to watch, to observe, to see how far she'd go with the lie before it unraveled. Sometimes silence says more than confrontation. When she finally emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, she smiled at me. A soft, practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Didn't mean to wake you, she said, voice syrupy sweet. I nodded, my face neutral, my mind anything but. I figured you were still asleep, she added, as if explaining why she hadn't texted. Why she hadn't called. Long night? I asked, keeping my tone light. She gave a little laugh, the kind you use to cover up a truth. You know how these things go. One drink turns into 3. Conversations get deep. Didn't realize how late it was. I watched her as she spoke. The way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of the towel. The way her gaze skittered past mine. Every tick, every tell was like a neon sign. And yet, she was banking on my trust. On the foundation we had built over years of marriage. The same foundation she was now quietly chipping away at. It's a strange thing, realizing your partner has already left the relationship, they're just still physically there. Bethany moved past me again, into the bedroom. She opened the closet, pulled out fresh clothes, humming a soft tune that felt painfully out of place. As if this was just another morning. As if nothing had shifted. I let her have the moment. Because sometimes you have to let people dig their own graves. As she dressed, I thought back to the last few months. The missed calls. The sudden meetings. The nights she came home with stories that didn't quite add up. Each instance had seemed innocent on its own. But put together, they painted a picture I couldn't ignore. I remembered the first time I noticed the new perfume. Subtle, sweet, with a sharp floral bite. Not her usual scent. She said it was a sample from a coworker. Just trying something new, she'd said. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. Now, with the evidence staring me in the face, that memory felt like a warning I hadn't heeded. She finished dressing, tossed the towel into the hamper, and glanced at me. Pancakes? She asked, as if this was any other lazy Sunday morning. Sure, I said, my voice steady. But inside, something had cracked. I knew this was just the beginning. The first blow in a series of hits I hadn't seen coming. But now I was awake. And I wasn't going to let it catch me off guard again. That morning, as she moved around the kitchen, flipping pancakes and humming to herself, I made a silent promise. This was the last time I'd be blindsided. A few days later, another moment carved itself into my memory. The kind of moment that, on its own, might seem insignificant to an outsider. But when you're already standing on shaky ground, it hits differently. Bethany worked in a sleek glass office building downtown. Real estate firm. Modern. Polished. The kind of place where image mattered more than substance. I dropped by before on birthdays, anniversaries, surprise lunches. She used to light up when I showed up unannounced. There was a time when seeing me midday was a bright spot in her routine. Not this time. I decided to swing by around noon, thinking we could grab lunch. No big gesture. Just two people reconnecting. Maybe I was being naive, hoping to salvage a piece of normalcy. But something in me wanted to believe we still had that. That I wasn't just a background character in my own marriage. When I walked into the lobby, I noticed right away how cold it felt. Not the temperature. The atmosphere. The receptionist gave me a polite smile, but it was the kind you give to strangers. Not the warm, "Oh, you must be Bethany's husband," smile I used to get. "She's in her office," she said after checking her screen. "You can go up." The elevator ride was quiet. Too quiet. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored walls. For a brief moment, I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe Bethany was just stressed. Maybe I was letting my insecurities get the better of me. But then the elevator doors opened. And there it was. Bethany's office was at the end of a glass corridor. As I walked toward it, I caught sight of her through the transparent walls. She wasn't alone. A young man stood close to her desk. Tall, athletic build, windbreaker slung casually over his shoulder. His body language was relaxed, familiar. Too familiar. As I approached, he glanced in my direction. Our eyes met briefly. He gave a subtle nod, acknowledgement without warmth. Then, with practiced ease, he turned and disappeared through a side door. "Delivery guy," Bethany said quickly before I even had a chance to ask. "He always gets lost." You'd think after the third time he'd remember this is the top floor. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. That same brittle smile I was starting to hate. A delivery guy. Right? Because delivery guys hang out inside private offices having quiet, close conversations with married women. Because delivery guys give you that look, that assessing, territorial glance. I didn't challenge her. Not yet. "Lunch?" I asked, holding up the bag of her favorite takeout. "Actually, I have a conference call in 15 minutes, she said, glancing at her screen. But thank you. You're sweet for stopping by. Sweet? That word stung more than it should have. Sweet was safe. Sweet was harmless. Sweet was what you called your brother, your uncle, not your husband. I left without making a scene. The elevator ride down felt colder this time. That evening, I noticed her phone was off during dinner. Face down on the table. Normally, she was glued to it, scrolling, texting, double-checking calendars. But tonight, it sat there like a sealed vault. It didn't vibrate. Didn't light up. Nothing. When I asked her about her day, she kept it vague. Busy. Productive. Same old. But it wasn't the same old. Not anymore. In the days that followed, her phone developed a curious habit. It would conveniently die during her lunch breaks. She blamed an old battery. Said she kept forgetting her charger. Which was odd considering how meticulously she organized every other aspect of her life. Coincidences piled up. Late meetings. Networking events that never appeared on her calendar. A sudden influx of girls' nights that didn't involve the usual friends. When I casually asked about Kelsey, the friend who'd allegedly cried all over her last week, Bethany stumbled. Couldn't recall when she'd last seen her. The cracks were widening. One night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying every little inconsistency. It was like assembling a puzzle where the picture was already clear, but I kept hoping to find a missing piece that would change the image. Spoiler alert, that piece wasn't coming. Still, part of me clung to denial. It's a strange kind of self-preservation. You don't want to believe that the person you built your life with is actively dismantling it behind your back. You'd rather believe you're being paranoid. That you're overthinking. But your gut doesn't lie. It whispers to you in those quiet moments. It tugs at you when their stories don't add up. It tightens in your chest when you notice how quickly they lock their phone when you walk into the room. Bethany had once been an open book. Now she was a locked safe, and I didn't even have the combination anymore. The man in the windbreaker haunted my thoughts. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his role in her life. But I knew his presence wasn't innocent. The way he looked at me, like he knew something I didn't, told me everything. But still, I waited. Not because I was weak, but because I needed clarity. Concrete evidence. I wasn't going to accuse her based on gut feelings and half-glimpsed moments. No, if this was going to blow up, it would do so with undeniable facts. The following weekend, Bethany announced another fitness club outing. This time, it was a charity run. For a cause she couldn't quite explain when I asked about it. It's just a good cause, she said, avoiding specifics. As she packed her gym bag, I noticed her slipping in a pair of heels. For a charity run. When I raised an eyebrow, she laughed it off. It's for after. Dinner with the girls. Right? I let her go. Kissed her on the cheek. Watched her walk out the door with the ease of someone who thought they were still fooling me. The house felt different when she was gone. Quieter. Not peaceful, empty. The walls seemed to echo with conversations we weren't having anymore. The photos on the mantel mocked me. Smiling faces frozen in time, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the darkened TV screen, wondering when exactly things had started to slip. Was it when she took that new job? When she started staying late? Or was it earlier? Subtler? A series of small, neglected moments that snowballed into this chasm between us? I didn't have the answers. But I knew this much: whatever was going on, it wasn't in my head. The evidence was stacking up. Quietly. Relentlessly. And sooner or later, the truth would stop being avoidable. That crack in the glass wasn't just a surface scratch anymore. It was spreading. The truth always has a way of coming out. Sometimes it crashes through the front door. Other times it seeps in quietly through the cracks you've been pretending not to see. For me, it came through glass. It was a Thursday afternoon when it happened. One of those rare spring days when the sun actually feels warm, and the city smells almost clean. Bethany had left early, gym bag in tow, for another fitness club session. She kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't spent the last few weeks tiptoeing around the truth. But she'd made a mistake that morning. A small one, barely noticeable. She forgot her gym bag by the door. First, I thought about calling her, letting her know she'd left it behind. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and mine had been growing louder by the day. When I unzipped the bag, I expected the usual: leggings, sneakers, water bottle. What I found instead was a different kind of gear. A silky blouse, tucked under her spare gym clothes. High heels. A small bottle of perfume. The same sharp, sweet scent I'd caught lingering on her skin more than once. For a fitness club meetup. I sat there, staring at that bag like it had personally betrayed me. Every excuse, every vague explanation replayed in my head. And suddenly, they all clicked into place. That's when the idea hit me. Simple. Obvious. Why hadn't I done it before? I decided to take the bag to her. Not as an accusation. Not as a confrontation. Just an errand. A husband doing a thoughtful thing for his wife. Or so it would appear. The fitness club wasn't far. A sleek, modern building with glass walls and motivational quotes plastered everywhere. I'd driven past it 100 times, never once thinking it would become ground zero for my unraveling marriage. As I stepped into the lobby, the receptionist greeted me with a bright, oblivious smile. "Hi there. How can I help you?" I held up the bag. "My wife forgot this. Bethany Carter." "Oh, Bethany," she said, her tone familiar, friendly. "She's in a session right now. With Ryan." Ryan. The name rang a bell. Bethany had mentioned him before, always with a dismissive tone. "Ryan's a joke. Ryan thinks he's God's gift to women." The kind of comments you throw out to downplay attention. But as the receptionist gestured toward the glass-walled studio, the truth hit me like a gut punch. There they were, Bethany and Ryan. Through the glass, I saw them standing close. Too close. His hand rested on her waist, guiding her posture, but his fingers lingered in a way that wasn't professional. Bethany laughed at something he said. An easy, unguarded laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. She reached up to adjust his collar, her movements slow, int asterisk mate. It was a moment I wasn't supposed to see, and yet there it was, raw, unfiltered. The world seemed to go quiet around me. The hum of treadmills, the thud of weights, all of it faded into white noise as I watched my wife give a piece of herself to someone else. A piece that used to belong to me. I didn't storm in, didn't make a scene. Instead, I turned around, gym bag still in hand, and walked out. The sunshine felt colder now, the air sharper, but the fog that had clouded my mind for weeks was finally lifting. On the drive home, my thoughts were merciless. No more benefit of the doubt. No more excuses. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't insecurity. This was betrayal. That evening, after Bethany got home, I watched her go through her usual routine, kicked off her shoes, scrolled through her phone, chatted about her intense session, and how Ryan finally stopped being annoying. I almost laughed. The performance was so polished, so practiced. But I didn't react. Not yet. Later that night, as she showered, I found something else. In her purse, tucked between her wallet and a receipt, were 2 concert tickets. Front row seats. To a band I didn't even know she liked. The date? This weekend. My name wasn't on them. But Ryan's was. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was reality. Cold. Undeniable. I sat there for a long time, ticket in hand, feeling the weight of it settle on my chest. You always think you'll know what to do when this moment comes. Yell. Confront. Demand answers. But in that moment all I felt was tired. Tired of pretending. Tired of second-guessing. Tired of loving someone who was already halfway out the door. When Bethany came out of the bathroom, wrapped in her towel, she found me sitting on the bed, scrolling through my phone. She didn't notice the tickets lying on the dresser. Or maybe she did and chose to ignore them. "Early day tomorrow," she said, slipping into bed beside me. "You should get some sleep." Sleep, as if rest could fix this. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That night, I stared at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of the truth settle in. The woman lying inches from me wasn't really there. Not emotionally. Not honestly. She was living a double life and I was simply the last one to realize it. But not anymore. Bethany's betrayal wasn't an event. It was a process. A slow erosion of trust, choice by choice, lie by lie. And now the mask was slipping. She thought she was still in control, that I was still in the dark. But that illusion had shattered. The next morning she left early again. Same routine. Same kiss on the cheek. Same tired excuses. But as she walked out that door, something in me shifted. I wasn't the clueless husband anymore. I was just a man waiting for the right moment to reclaim his life. And that moment was coming. Soon. It's a strange thing when you finally stop fighting the truth. You'd think betrayal would come with fire and rage, with shouting matches and slammed doors. But when it truly sinks in, when it becomes your new normal, it's not an explosion. It's a quiet surrender. That's how it felt with Bethany. In the days after finding those concert tickets, something in me shut off. Not out of defeat, but out of clarity. The struggle, the inner tug-of-war between doubt and denial, was over. She wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she hadn't been for a long time. She just hadn't bothered to tell me. But instead of confronting her, instead of blowing it all up, I did something she didn't expect. I watched. I observed her in a way I hadn't in years. Every movement, every gesture, every word was part of a well-rehearsed play. She was still going through the motions of being my wife. Blending smoothies in the morning. Tidying up the kitchen. Asking how my day was, though she never waited for the answer. It was mechanical. Detached. She had emotionally checked out. The affair, the lies, the secrecy, it wasn't even a thrill anymore. It was routine. For her, this dual life had become ordinary. Something she managed between yoga classes and dinner plans. And I realized, sitting across from her at the kitchen table, that she wasn't even trying to hide it. Not really. She just didn't care if I noticed anymore. That was the real betrayal. Not the physical act of cheating, but the indifference. At first, I thought the silence between us would be suffocating. But it wasn't. There was a strange calm in it. A quiet understanding that neither of us dared to say out loud, "This is over." We're just too cowardly to admit it. I started to detach too. I'd wake up early, before her, and sit by the window with my coffee, watching the world wake up. I'd take longer routes to work, stop by parks, clear my head. Anywhere but home. I wasn't running from her. I was reclaiming space for myself. It's funny how you can live with someone, share a bed, eat meals together, and still feel lonelier than when you're actually alone. But that loneliness? It stopped feeling like a curse. It started feeling like freedom. No more guessing games. No more waiting up for her fitness meetups. No more twisting my gut into knots every time her phone buzzed. I knew the score now. One night, as she sat curled up on the couch, scrolling through her phone, I watched her with a detached curiosity. Like you'd watch a stranger in a waiting room. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did and didn't care. I wondered if Ryan was texting her at that moment. Or if it was someone else. Was he the only one? Or just the most convenient? It didn't even hurt to ask those questions anymore. I had passed through pain into a colder, quieter place. A place where acceptance lives. It wasn't that I stopped loving her. Love doesn't just vanish. But it changes. It hardens. It becomes something else. Respect erodes. Trust crumbles. And what's left is a kind of ghost, a memory of what used to be. I didn't hate her. I didn't wish her ill. I just didn't see her as my person anymore. One evening after dinner, she mentioned booking a wellness retreat next month. A weekend away. She talked about it like it was nothing, rattling off the details, never once asking if I wanted to join her. Because she already knew the answer. Or maybe she didn't care. Either way, that was the moment I knew. Really knew. She had already left this marriage. Physically, she was still here moving through our shared spaces, but emotionally? She was somewhere else entirely. I was simply the last one to accept it. And strangely, that realization didn't crush me. It released me. Bethany had made her choice long ago. Now it was my turn. I wasn't going to rage. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to chase someone who had no intention of staying. I was going to walk away with my dignity intact. But I would do it on my terms. Quietly. Deliberately. The calm of resignation wasn't defeat. It was clarity. And with clarity comes power. The power to let go. And that was exactly what I planned to do. Freedom doesn't always come with a dramatic gesture. Sometimes it begins with something as simple as filling out a form. It was a quiet evening, the kind where the air feels heavier than usual. Bethany was upstairs, humming to herself as she packed for a wellness retreat she hadn't bothered to invite me to. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, staring at the blinking cursor of a divorce attorney's website. A simple consultation request form. Name. Contact info. Brief description of the situation. There it was, freedom sitting behind a few keystrokes. No yelling. No accusations. Just action. I filled it out with the same steady hands I used to build our future. Strange, isn't it? How the same hands that held hers at the altar were now typing out the end of us. For weeks, maybe months, I'd been stuck in limbo. Suspicion. Hurt. Anger. But tonight, all of that quieted. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making her pay. It was about reclaiming my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control again. I didn't need her permission. I didn't need an apology that would never come. I needed closure. My closure. After submitting the form, I sat back, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't relief. Not yet. But it was a start. The next step was gathering what I already knew. I wasn't a fool. Bethany had left digital footprints all over the place. She was careless. Or maybe she thought I'd never bother looking. Either way, her arrogance made my task easier. I started with the obvious: call logs. Late-night calls to a number I didn't recognize. Consistent. Repeated. It didn't take much effort to match it to Ryan's contact info thanks to a shared payment on our joint account. She had paid for a personal training package under his name. Personal indeed. From there, it snowballed. Gym records. Payments for sessions that didn't exist. Receipts for dinners that didn't match her stories. The concert tickets were just the tip of the iceberg. As I compiled the evidence, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. It was clinical. Factual. Like gathering documents for a tax audit. Somewhere along the way, I had detached. She had already emotionally divorced me. I was just catching up on the paperwork. That night, Bethany came down the stairs, suitcase in hand. She gave me a bright smile, the same one she'd perfected over months of deception. Leaving early tomorrow, she said, adjusting the strap. So don't wait up. I nodded, offering nothing in return. She didn't notice. Or pretended not to. As she retreated to the guest room, her new sanctuary within these walls, I looked around the house. The photos. The mementos. The shared history we'd built. None of it hurt anymore. Because I had shifted my focus to the future. A future without her. And it felt good. In a small act of quiet defiance, I removed my wedding ring that night. Placed it gently in the drawer by my bedside. No ceremony. No theatrics. Just a simple act of liberation. The next morning, before Bethany left, she paused by the front door. Take care of yourself while I'm gone, okay? She said, her tone light, breezy. As if we were still playing house. As if she hadn't spent the past year dismantling us. I always do, I replied. That was the last exchange before the door closed behind her. As her car disappeared down the street, I didn't feel the usual wave of anxiety. I didn't wonder where she was really going. Or who she was really with. Because it didn't matter anymore. She was no longer my concern. That day, I scheduled my first meeting with the attorney. Set up consultations. Sent over the evidence. The response was swift, professional, reassuring. I wasn't alone in this. There was a plan now. A path forward. Each email, each document, each step was a brick laid on the road back to myself. For so long, I had felt suffocated. Trapped in a marriage where I was the only one fighting to keep it alive. Now, with every action I took, it felt like breathing again. Deep. Full. Unapologetic. It wasn't dramatic. There were no ultimatums. No screaming matches. Just quiet, deliberate progress. And for the first time in months, that quiet didn't feel like defeat. It felt like power. Bethany had her affair. Her double life. Her version of freedom. Now I had mine. But mine was built on truth. On clarity. On finally choosing myself.